Philips teams up with Nintendo, Sega buys out Virgin, and Intel breaks speed barriers. These stories and many more on this episode of the Video Game Newsroom Time Machine.
I've been waiting a long time for a chance to say this. Stop the presses.
Requiescat in pace.
Makes him crazy, man. What is a man?
It's me, Mario.
What a mess.
Get over here!
Please save me.
Welcome back to the Video Game Newsroom Time Machine, the podcast where we travel back in time to see what was making headlines in the video game and home computer industry 40, 30, and 20 years ago. This week we'll be heading back to June of 1991. I'm Carl, and my co-host Peter is on vacation this week, but we have a special treat for you. We have a special co-host today, a man revered by hundreds of thousands of retro game podcast listeners worldwide, co-host of the UK's #1 retro gaming podcast, the Retro Asylum, Mads. Welcome back to the show, Mads.
Hi, Carl. Thanks a lot. I'm strapped into the time machine here and ready to do a 20-year jump. And by the way, just call me Peter if it makes stuff easier for you. No worries there.
I think I'll be able to keep this one straight. I mean, we have known each other long enough at this point.
We have indeed. Actually, we almost started the podcast together, 7 years ago? Something like that?
Oh, yeah, something like that. Yeah, back when it was when we were the offshoot of the Retro Game Squad.
Exactly.
The Retro Game Club.
Exactly.
Yeah, those were good times. That was a good blog that we had running there.
Oh, yes. Yes.
It's still up someplace, right? Or
I think it's still running there. It was just a Google site blog, so it's probably there somewhere, yeah.
Awesome. I'll have to look at that someplace and add it to the show notes below. So, you're here. We're going to be traveling back. Now, it's especially good that you're here for this one because I know that you have a particular affinity for a little machine known as the Amiga.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes.
Yes. And, well, it's one of our traditions here on the show that the co-host is subjected to 7 minutes of playing a game that was reviewed in the month in question. Remember, for our purposes of our jump, we're always using the cover dates on magazines, so all the events that we talk about actually happened at some point earlier, blah, blah, blah. It's a framing device.
And can I just say, I'm really looking forward to this call. I'm sure you've just chosen a corker of a game for me on my most beloved platform, the Amiga.
Of course. I know that you're so well versed in the deep library of titles for the system that I had to find something that even a connoisseur like you may have missed. One of those rare, seldom played, seldom heard of gems in that vast library of titles. And I think that I've hit the mark with a game from a very prominent adventure game studio of the time, Level 9. And it's one of their final games. Actually, it is their final game. The Champion of the Raj. Mm-hmm. So, let's go to Mads' 7 Minutes in Heaven. Welcome back from your 7 minutes in heaven, Mads. So, explain based on the time you spent with the game, which, well, we'll just foreshadow it was a little bit more than 7 minutes for reasons that will become apparent. But just based off of the time you spent with the game, how would you describe, what do you think happens in Champion of Raj?
So, let's see what happens. You are the viceroy of the East Indian Company, I think, and you need to It's a strategy game where you have a map and you need to talk to the different leaders of the different regions of the map. Some of the different regions they are your enemies. You have to attack them and like conquer them, and you have to put on parades and shows to show the people that you are a good leader and get their support, and pretty much a run-of-the-mill strategy game from back then, really, isn't it? But moving so slow that you'd think Molasses is kind of crazy quick moving. So because this is the worst game I've ever seen, Carl. I mean, these 7 minutes in heaven turned out to be 27 minutes in purgatory, and I'm not really sure what I've done to deserve that. But I'm just putting it out there. We could have been playing games like NAM 75 on the Neo Geo. That was released in July 1991, for example, or Raiden on the Genesis. That was released in July 1991 as well. But no, you had me play this instead. Knowing you, I thought you picked a good game for me, so I thought I'm going to play this on real hardware. So I fired up my A500. Luckily, I've got a GoTech drive, so it loads a tiny bit faster than the normal disk drive. But I would say out of these 27 minutes, I got, let's say, 3 or 4 minutes of gameplay. The rest of the time, I was loading stuff. And this was the worst disk loading routine I have ever seen in my life. It would say, insert disk 2, load for a few seconds. Insert disk 1, load for a few seconds. Insert disk 2, load for a few seconds. Insert disk 1, load for a few seconds. And then finally, insert disk 2 and load for a few seconds. And then it would progress. I mean, what is up with that? I mean, everybody back then knew how to design their layout on disk. These guys, they should have used 3 disks and duplicated stuff instead. This was just infuriating. So thank you very much for these 7 minutes in purgatory, or just straight up hell.
And I have to apologize. Normally, when I give somebody one of these games, Peter or John, I have played the game to a certain extent beforehand. I knew the reputation of Raj just from the reviews back in the day, which were not good, not great, I shouldn't say, but they were sort of mediocre. They were in the middle. And the history of the company behind it was so interesting to me. And because it was a game that I was pretty sure you hadn't played on a system that you have a deep, deep knowledge of, I thought it would make it more interesting. I truly do apologize. Any of our Patreon supporters who have seen the video version of this knows that I apologize profusely multiple times for this. I'm sorry. I did not think it was going to be this bad.
Yeah, but I had good fun. And as you know, I am a retro gamer, and I enjoy just sitting down with these games and seeing what they are, even if they are turds sometimes. So, I mean, this game, speeded up by a factor of 20 for the loading times, it would actually be a good game, I'm sure, because there's something there to like in the strategy element of it. But the fact that when I was at the map, I was a bit afraid of clicking one of the 20, 25 regions, because I knew I've made my choice then. I'd be waiting 30 seconds for something to load until I could see whether I could actually attack this region or talk to its leader or do nothing at all. And mostly, there's nothing at all to do in the beginning. So you'd be clicking stuff and you'll be waiting and waiting and waiting. Ah, damn, nothing there. I'm going to click the next one. Waiting. So please, Patreon listeners, go check out the video and see what I had to endure. But it was good fun. It was good fun.
Yeah, for somebody. Definitely not for you, though. Yeah, and the history of the company that I was referring to, and we talked about it a little bit already. This was made by a company called Level 9. They were 3 brothers. They started their company in 1981. They were pretty well known in the niche of text adventures. So, you know, the European style with graphics on the top, text on the bottom. And they realized they needed to get into other types of games, and they created this game engine that was supposed to create 2 games, Champion of Raj and Billy the Kid. And Billy the Kid was going to be released by Ocean, got big advertisements everywhere, and then Ocean canned it, saying, you know, the game was just too buggy, it wasn't polished enough, they wouldn't release it. And this is Ocean, okay? Anybody who played Ocean games back in the day knows that Ocean will release almost anything. Street Hawk, Miami Vice, Knight Rider. Those were quality turds. But this they would not release. And it's made with the same exact game engine and so forth. And the company then dissolved after that. I think one or two of the brothers still had some jobs afterwards in the game industry, but they pretty much left the industry after this game. It broke them. So, but it also, I think, is emblematic of the European, especially the UK game industry at this point, where so many of the developers had stayed too long in the 80s mold of game development, be it 8-bit designs or text adventures or whatever, but they hadn't actually moved along with the times. I mean, 91, the Amiga has been around for 6 years. The Atari ST has been around for 6 years. They're just now starting to develop games that will really only be developed for these systems. And that's just too little, too late, unfortunately. And by the time they would have learned these lessons, if they had released this game, let's say in 86, we probably would have turned a blind eye to some of the faults.
Yeah.
But by 91, dude, Wing Commander's over there on the PC and stuff. Centurion Defender of Rome has just been released on the Genesis. It's too little, too late. But oh well. Okay. Any final thoughts on your little trip here? How would you sum it up?
How would I sum it up? I would say if you're considering playing Champions of the Rush, and well, just don't really. It doesn't look good. It doesn't sound great. It plays even worse. Maybe if you have a WHD load version and an Amiga 1200, try it out, because maybe you'll have some load times that you can live with. But as is, don't play this on your Amiga 500 unless you've got like a lot of time. I mean, if you're like in isolation because you got COVID, that's fine. Play Champions of the Rush if you got nothing else to play. But nah, just stay away.
That is probably words of wisdom. Okay. Before we can turn on the time machine, we have one more bit of housekeeping to do. We need to check in with our good friend Ethan for the Department of Corrections. Welcome back to the show, Ethan. So, before we get into all the wonderful things that I messed up in June of 1991, we have an order of business, namely...
a Peter comment, as it were.
Yes.
So he was talking about Olaf Olafsson, and see if he had a son named Olaf Olafsson's son, in which it reminded me of this very funny video. Why don't you play it, Carl?
Oh, you mean this one?
Gunnar Gunnarsson. Is it about my son, Gunnar Gunnarsson's song?
Okay. That was funny.
You can tell we're doing this live, obviously.
Of course.
This is the first time Carl's ever seen this video, too.
Yeah, never seen this before, like ages ago. Yes.
So that's what came to mind. Don't know if that's what Peter was thinking of, but either way.
Either way, yes. Excellent reference.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that our Scandinavian co-host today will have nothing to say about this.
Beautiful. All right. So we're headed off onto the docket of corrections, which is held in the Department of Corrections, in the folder of corrections, in the file cabinet of corrections.
That's a lot of labeling. Batman would be proud.
Beautiful, beautiful. All right. So you were talking about the Game Genie, and you said Camerica made it, but they did not. Everything that Camerica put out was something from Codemasters, but they were not a subsidiary of Codemasters.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they were an independent sales organization that had a partnership with Codemasters. It's all a little vague, but if you watch the gaming historian video on the Aladdin Deck Enhancer, it says everything that we actually know about Camerica. which is not a lot, but they are not a subsidiary of Codemasters.
Gotcha. Okay, good to know.
And next up, we get to talk about the wonderful, the great Mario and Zelda CDI games, and the Donkey Kong game, which never happened, thank God. Do not taint that legacy as well. So the CDI games, it's a bit confusing as to why they might have come about. And the general speculation is that it happened because Nintendo wanted to do something with CD, and so as a conciliatory thing to Philips, they offered them the rights to use those characters. But that was probably not it.
Oh, really?
Yeah, the probable reason, we don't have confirmation on this. Alex Smith specifically asked Howard Lincoln this, but he didn't remember exactly. Because, Nintendo's been involved in a lot of litigations, so how can you possibly remember every single one? But if you recall, Philips was the company that bought Magnavox. And Magnavox, as Philips, sued Nintendo over their light gun technology in 1986. And Nintendo settled out of that suit. And it is supposed that part of that settlement was the use of Mario and Zelda characters for these CDI games.
Gotcha. I mean, yeah, of course it's suspect the timing of the CDI or I should say the Super Nintendo add-on and these ads coming up is literally the same month, but it makes more sense that it may have been a compromise on the light gun tech.
Yeah, and more broadly, I think Nintendo, they had an interest in getting into this field, and whatever nonsense happened with Sony, still don't know exactly that, but it seemed like if we're going to make a presence as Nintendo on CD platforms, why not get something out of it in the fact that we don't have to pay as much in our settlement and let them make these games.
Makes sense.
All right. And this one was just because Peter said I had to, because he was waving me down in the recording when you were talking about this US Gold Sonic license. I don't have anything to add to that because I don't know what happened, why they didn't put out a game, but I don't think you communicated rightly to Peter about US Gold's reputation for such ports. I think that's what he was confused about. It's like, why are you talking about this? It's because it would have been terrible.
Yes, it would have. But maybe it would have been like Final Fight on the Amiga, and 20 years later we'd find a text message from the programmer telling us just how terrible it was to work on that game.
Yes. Code comments can be quite fun. Go look at TCRF sometime, and you'll find some interesting things hidden in between the lines.
Exactly.
And final one out of this month, so not really all too much. You keep saying Crystal Skulls. You've done this several times. It is Crystal Skull, singular, and unpopular opinion. I don't think it's a terrible movie.
Have you watched the CGI ant scene and the CGI monkey scenes?
I'm not a big fan of those, but I don't think the movie's terrible.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I mean, if you took it on average with all the other movies that have ever existed, yeah, it's probably top 50%. But yeah, it's if it wasn't an Indiana Jones movie, maybe
people elevate that series too much. But anyways, we're getting to the end of the Department of Corrections, and we will see you in the next one for May of 2001. So thank you.
You're welcome, and thank you for your service to Queen, country, and the truth. And I have no idea what that means. Okay.
Guten bye.
So those were the corrections this month, were they? Okay.
Yeah.
So I'm going to correct the Department of Corrections here because I mean, what's up with the whole Gunnar son thing? I mean, don't they know how we name people, or we used to name people in the old Norse tradition? It's easy. If Carl has a son, he'll be called Carlson. If Gunnar has a son, he'd be called Gunnarsson, as a surname, of course. So Gunnar Gunnarsson's son would actually just be called Gunnar Gunnarsson. So
it makes
that
perfect
correct
sense. So you have now corrected both Peter and Ethan in one fell swoop.
Yes.
Excellent. And there should be no more jokes about Norse names.
No, not on this show, at least. But
not on this show.
Can I say I feel I'm a bit afraid right now because I've been correcting the Department of Corrections. Let me just say I love Ethan. Thank you, Ethan. Thank you for keeping Carl on the straight and narrow. I mean, I really appreciate your work. So I'm looking forward to. I'm actually hoping in the Department of Corrections for this episode that you're gonna sing my name like you do Peter's for the comment. Hopefully there'll be something to sing about.
Oh, definitely. Trust me. Alone in your 7 minutes of heaven, there were at least 2 or 3 worthy comments. So Ethan will have plenty to choose from.
That's good.
That will not be a problem. Okay. With that concluded, we can finally turn on the time machine and head back 30 years to July of 1991.
Wait a second. Do I need to strap in or anything? Is this going to hurt? How would you do this?
Well, it really all depends. Did you booze up beforehand?
Yes. I'm thoroughly boozed up, actually.
Excellent. Okay, you actually have booze there. So, no, you won't feel a thing.
That's good.
Me, the knees act up a little bit. It's the cold of time and space that gets you a little bit. But, other than that, you'll be okay.
Sounds good.
I think.
Turn it on, mate.
I mean, I haven't lost too many co-hosts.
Now you tell me?
I think Peter's going to come back.
Now there's a new game in the video arcade. 1991. Virtual reality. Let's play Thunderblade.
The market's very fickle.
Welcome back to July of 1991. Mads, what's our first story?
The AMOA goes to Washington.
While the AAMA, the trade organization for coin-op manufacturers, did their big lobbying blitz on Capitol Hill the previous month, in May, the AMOA, the trade organization for the coin-op operators, tried to sway lawmakers to their cause. Among the topics at issue were the promotion of $1 coins, as well as an attempt to prevent large cable companies from getting in on coin-op's traditional markets of supplying music and entertainment to bars and restaurants.
So hold on here. Cable companies tried to get in on that business? Supplying music and entertainment?
Well, yeah, there was this idea around this time. So in 1991, most of the cable companies were only using a relatively small portion of the total bandwidth. And the idea of digitizing the information and starting to output digital signals, compressed signals over the cable lines was becoming a feasible option. I mean, we've got CD-based systems coming down the pipeline with MPEG and so forth. So the idea that you were no longer going to be limited on the cable bandwidth to how much normal broadcast television or radio you could put, but you could expand it dramatically.
Okay.
And start offering, 50 additional channels of audio that a bar might just purchase a subscription to, so they wouldn't have to have the jukebox there anymore.
I see. So, but then still, it wouldn't be on demand as a jukebox is. You can go and pick your songs. It would just be a stream, I guess, like 50 different radio stations that you'd be streaming.
It would just be that, but also remember, from the standpoint of a restaurateur, you want to have music playing all the time, right? You don't want a break in the music. And if somebody's not putting another nickel in the Nickelodeon, then there's no music, using the old school terminology here.
Yeah.
So For them, and this has already been a problem since the 1970s with what they were calling piped-in music. So where the music is coming from a centralized system, a tape deck or something in the back office. With records, it really was never an option because the records would have to be turned too often. Once you get to cassette tapes, suddenly it's starting to become an option, but then you're still limited maybe every 30 minutes or 40 minutes having to turn the tape.
Yeah.
If you have it piped in all the time, the restaurateur is just like, dude, I'll pay $20 a month for this. Who cares? Now the music's playing and I never have to worry about it.
True. So I always thought that they'd actually be making big money out of those jukeboxes. I remember when I was drinking back in the day, when I was just when I was a bit too young to be drinking, but I was drinking anyway. There would always be a jukebox, and then it would run out of coins, and somebody would go there and put some money in because we wanted to listen to some music, and there would be quiet in the cafe or bar whenever that was stopped. So I always thought of that as a huge revenue stream for the establishment.
Well, it depends. I mean, the establishment doesn't own the machinery. There's also a big thing around this time, on even way before this, that the jukebox, and we haven't been reporting it on the show because it's not part of it, but I keep reading about the articles for it in all the trade magazines, that they've got to pay music rights for every song that's played. They also have to pay, split the take with the restaurateur, and they have to also make sure that the machine is running. Because at this point, CD-based jukeboxes are just now coming online. And even those, unlike the old record ones, which were very much a physical, mechanical thing, the CD players are still mechanical. If something gets jammed up, you got to send somebody out there to fix it. And while it's jammed up for those 2 or 3 hours, you're not making any money off the machine. So there's a lot of factors involved here. Also, get the latest music in there. Well, what is the latest music? Ooh, do you have the latest pop hit that came out this week? No. Is it playing over the piped-in music from the cable company? Of course.
Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah. And they were also already worried about, interactive entertainment. They were, pub quizzes type things, which is a reality today. They were worried about it in 91. And so they were hoping to get some kind of limitations on what cable companies could do. It was never really feasible. The government didn't really have that much control over what the cable companies could broadcast or could do with the service. And ultimately, the internet is going to just break down these barriers altogether. To the point where most jukeboxes nowadays are just downloading songs as you request them. So, it's a weird... And I mean, not all of them, obviously. The jukebox has a base storage of songs, but they usually also have the option to pay a little bit more, and they'll download an extra song or something.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So it's
So the
fun stuff, and
the $1 coins then they didn't really they weren't successful with, because I've been to the US many times and I have never actually seen a $1 coin.
There were $1 coins. There's the famous Susan B. Anthony coin, which was the one that they were pushing for. At this point, there's a later one that comes out afterwards. The problem with those coins is, number one, the size is a little awkward, so they're easily confusable with a quarter, I believe.
Okay.
Also, because a quarter is such a relatively big coin. And the other problem is that there was just this reluctance to move the dollar to a coin. People felt that it was going to infantilize, if you will, the dollar, make it feel less valuable. And for our Patreon subscribers, and soon the general feed, I actually have an interview with the then, at this point in time, president of the AMOA, and he actually goes into an anecdote about how he met with this one senator during this trip. And the senator pulled out a dollar bill and basically just told him behind closed doors, do you really think I'm ever going to give up this greenback for some little damn coin? Basically told him, you get out of your mind, boy, type of thing. It's a great anecdote. It's in the interview. You should check it out. So, the $1 coin is a necessity for the survival of coin-op at this point because bill readers are just way too expensive to put in the machines. And 25-cent pieces, I mean, when you're starting asking people to put 4 coins into the machine, it's just no longer an impulse purchase.
No, that's true.
But if it was just, one coin, you don't think about 1 coin. But if you think about 4 coins, it doesn't matter what the denomination of the coin is, it's still 4 coins.
Yeah.
And, yeah. So, oh well. They will not get that, unfortunately.
No. But let's move on to the next part then. Galoob beats Nintendo in court.
After Comerica's victory in Canada, the U.S. District Court in San Francisco ruled on July 5th that the Game Genie could go on sale in the U.S. Unfortunately, they will have to wait for the written decision bringing the device to market, but they can begin production of inventory immediately. While they will also get the $15 million Nintendo had to post as security, Galoob posted a loss of $30 million in 1990.
Yeah, well, at least we know that the Game Genie did come out and did go on sale in the US at some point.
Yeah, it does go on sale, but really what they needed was the 1990 Christmas, because Christmas 1991 is going to be the first big Christmas for 16-bit. I mean, the NES is still going to sell well. And they will develop Game Genie's devices for other systems. But that $15 million Nintendo had to post was just a fraction of what they could have earned in 1990, because that was the year when the NES was the king of the world.
Yeah.
And it's just coming, 6 months too late.
Yeah, at this point in time, we have the Sega Genesis out there, and it's selling like hotcakes. These at about 90-91, I guess. So,
well, the Sega Genesis is selling well, but it's not selling like hotcakes yet.
Okay.
Remember, the NES in the US is still killing it because Nintendo just a few months earlier. So, Christmas of 1990, the NES Nintendo is still locking down the third parties. There's no Konami, there's no Capcom games on the Genesis. They've really locked them out, and all the big licenses like Ninja Turtles and stuff are still exclusive to the Nintendo.
Yeah.
And it's only going to be in Christmas 1990 with Sonic the Hedgehog, which came out last month, or it got reviewed last month, that we're finally getting killer apps for the Genesis. Yeah,
true.
Yeah, and in the first year, 89, Walmart wouldn't carry it. They never carry anything in the first year, as Michael Katz explained in my interview with him. He was the president when it launched. But so became president shortly after the launch. I can't remember what the timeline was. But so Nintendo is very, very smart in the sense that they lost this, but at the end of the day, it doesn't matter because the NES is now the outgoing hardware. The Super Nintendo is the incoming hardware, and it's sort of played out. The battle has moved elsewhere.
Yeah, true. So for the next news, Philips announces CD-ROM deal with Nintendo.
One day after Sony announced their deal with Nintendo at the June CES, Philips announced that they too had cut a deal with Nintendo to offer a CD-ROM add-on for the Super NES. This player would play CD-ROM XA discs, ensuring CDI compatibility and creating a schism between the two 16-bit CD-based hardware platforms, as Sony's discs would not be compatible. Playthings magazine reports that speculation is that Nintendo announced the Philips deal in an attempt to compensate for an unfavorable deal with Sony.
And in the end, no deal went through anyway, so hooray for that. So
not quite.
Well, there were some prototypes made, of course, of the Super Nintendo with the CD-ROM add-on.
No, but the prototypes don't count. Remember, the CDI still got Mario and Zelda games.
Oh well, that's actually I do have a CDI, and I do play these Mario, Hotel Mario, and Link, the Faces of Evil, and Zelda, the Wand of Gamelot. Have you ever played those games, mate?
I have. I played the Mario Hotel game once, very briefly, in an in-store demo.
So they're very definitely not Zelda games, and they're definitely not Mario games. I actually do enjoy Link: The Faces of Evil, but I'm not really. I can't put my finger on why, because it's a mediocre adventure platformer. But for some reason I like it. The acting is so terribly bad, and the animation is like cheap 90s Saturday morning cartoons. But for some reason, there's something that just clicks with me. I like those games, but most people just stay away from the CDI versions of Zelda and Mario.
Well, most people just stayed away from CDI. Period.
Yeah,
let's be honest.
That's
there, that comes first, and the fact that the games had to stand side by side with the Super Nintendo release of Zelda. I mean, it comes out, a year apart? Not even, maybe?
So A Link to the Past was actually released in July 1991, I think.
Yeah, there you go. So, it's coming out after A Link to the Past.
And that's a game you can still play today.
Exactly. And so, it's one of those situations where if you're trying to tell me that this is the new super high-tech system, you're going to have to do better than that.
Yes. Most definitely. But it's funny, though, that 1991 really seems to be the year of the CD-ROM in the consoles. I mean, we have Sega CD. I'm sure it came out in 1991, maybe at the end of the year, for example.
It sounds about right because, we've talked about it a few months ago already that the first screenshots of it, pictures of it have been showing up. Yeah.
Late 91, and PC Engine had the dedicated PC Engine CD was in 91 as well. I mean, I know they had their CD-ROM add-on even earlier, maybe in 90 or 89 actually.
The CD-ROM add-on comes out 1991 as well.
Yeah.
In 91 in the US, probably earlier in Japan.
So much going on with and our beloved Amiga CD TV, of course, early 91 as well. So this is definitely when the CD-ROM hits, and a lot earlier than us. I had Amiga back in the day. I couldn't afford the Amiga CD TV. When I got a PC later on, I couldn't afford a CD-ROM. It was so expensive. But these consoles, they got it already.
Well, they got it, but remember, the add-ons were usually more expensive than the system itself. The Sega CD add-on was more expensive than a Genesis.
Okay.
Now, granted, it had, the extra chips and stuff inside that added a bunch of extra features. That's why you get those awesome sort of Mode 7 type games on there. But the problem is they're all single-speed CD-ROM drives. And everybody is recognizing the power of this and the potential of this, but that access speed, similar to Champions of Raj, is really going to take a bite out of the gameplay.
Oh yes, single speed CD-ROM isn't what you'd like to use today. But speaking of CD-ROM add-ons, Camerica adds CDs to its NES add-on plans.
Very nice transition. Camerica, which made headlines last month with their court victories over Nintendo with the Game Genie and for wanting to release unlicensed games, a handheld NES, and Game Boy to NES converters, are at it again with an NES cartridge that would allow gamers to plug in a standard music CD to load games onto the NES. The device, as described, would be very close to Codemaster's existing CD adapter for home microcomputers.
So the Codemaster's adapter, that would be all the way back from the ZX Spectrum to load stuff directly from audio, like you actually did back in the day from the audio tapes in that part of the market anyway.
Exactly. Well, they didn't, and they released it for the Commodore 64, ZX Spectrum, and I think they had plans for the Amstrad, but I don't think they released the Amstrad version. But yeah, and remember, it's Codemasters is the one making the Game Genie.
Yeah.
So, and they're also doing all the unlicensed. Camerica is just Codemasters Canada. And this is another one of these attempts are like, we can get onto this system. We can do it cheaper by releasing a CD as opposed to cartridges, which are expensive to manufacture. And we can put a ton of games on one CD and put them on there, not as data files, but as sound files, analog recording.
Yeah.
Yeah. Only problem is that you'd be limited to whatever the memory is in their special cartridge, but, and it would have to be read memory, RAM, not ROM.
So I'm sure for all of your non-European listeners, this sounds like black magic. But for us Europeans, it just makes sense because, of course, data is sound. Anyway, we're used to loading stuff off our cassette tapes. So putting it onto CDs, of course you can. I mean, I've seen people load their C64 games off a vinyl record. So, of course, you can do this.
Exactly. And last month we were talking about how the Dutch were going to be transferring... code over radio waves 10 years before this. Yep. So, I mean, yeah, using audio, and let's face it, that's also how modems worked back in the day. So it kind of makes sense, but again, it's just one of Camerica's many pipe dreams. Their handheld NES didn't come about, their Game Boy to NES didn't come out, and their CD adapter also is going to be vaporware. But hey, it's Camerica is kind of like Atari. Fun announcements every month that just keep things interesting.
Yeah. So speaking about the data over audio, I have a fun little fact here. I had a friend once who could handshake with a fax machine using just like he'd make these whistling sounds. So if a fax machine was calling him, he could do the handshake and then it would just start unloading all of its data. I don't know why, but he taught himself how to do that back in the day.
Oh, that is awesome. So he Captain Crunched it a little bit.
Yes. But enough about that. Let's go to the next piece of news here. Sega buys out Virgin.
With Nintendo making a move for the European market, Sega has bought out Virgin Mastertronics distribution rights to Sega's consoles. While Virgin was able to make the Master System a dominant force in the European market, Sega obviously feels they need to be more hands-on going into the upcoming 16-bit wars.
Okay. So Sega wants to control this market themselves and do the marketing themselves. That's what this is all about.
This is what it's all about. Okay. I mean, they had a bad experience in the States where Tonka had... the distribution rights for the Master System and totally flummoxed it. And while Virgin Mastertronic has done a good job, Virgin Mastertronic is also still doing, computer games and other stuff like this. And they will continue to have a hand in Sega games. They will have a blanket license to release games for the Genesis and for the Master System. But Sega, I think, wants to have a more uniform presence and identity both in the United States and Europe. They want to make sure that they're running the show and that the focus doesn't get lost.
Yeah. So Sega was definitely a big force in the 16-bit wars in Europe. I wonder if they would have been even bigger had they just stuck with Virgin, because they were actually pretty good at pushing the Master System. I mean, the Master System is a much loved system here in Europe, and most of us would know the Master System, but only seen one or two NESes in our lifetime back then, because they weren't that widespread here, at least in Denmark, and I know in the UK as well.
Yeah, and in Germany, the same thing. I mean, it really was a Master System world in Europe, and it had to do with the some different factors, but one of them was that Nintendo just didn't see the European market as profitable enough. It's too fragmented, too many small little differences from place to place, too many different retail chains to deal with, and so forth. And I think one of Sega's big advantages was the fact that Virgin Mastertronic, through its existing distribution of music and Mastertronic games, really was in the prime position to get the system into all of those retail spaces that Sega would or Nintendo would not have been able to get the systems into. Now, by the time the Genesis comes about, I don't know enough about the European retail space to know how much they lost, but I think Sega was a strong enough brand that it was worth their time to buy them out, and it did not come cheap. I mean, they paid £40 million to buy out the contract.
Oh,
that's that. At that time, that is some serious cashola.
Yeah, that's pretty steep. Pretty steep.
Yeah.
Yeah,
and
funny.
they were going to invest another $20 million just in advertising. So Sega is trying to go big.
Yeah, indeed. So for me, the 8-bit consoles never happened. I don't know about you, Carl, but I was a C64 dude, exclusively the C64 and other computers I'd see at other friends. So I famously, when I finally, I think it was my cousin who brought over a NES that he borrowed from a friend, and we played Mario Bros. I thought it was a bad Giant Sisters clone. Of course, that wasn't the case, but C64 gamer to the bone here.
Yeah, I had a somewhat similar experience. I was also a C64 kid, and I was growing up in Argentina, so the only consoles we got a glimpse of back in the day were Atari 2600s, because there was a company in Argentina that had a license for those. And we would also occasionally see some Master System stuff through Brazil, because it was big over there. There were a few stores that would have gray imports of the machines. But I also, every year for Christmas, we would go and visit my grandparents in Seattle, and I still had contact with an old buddy of mine, and he was one of those kids that had everything. So he had an NES, he had a Genesis. I mean, I remember in 83 or 84, whenever it was, he even had the handheld Defender game that showed up in Guardians of the Galaxy 2. When I saw that, I almost flipped out of the movie theater. I was like, I used to play that at my buddy's house. So he had all the cool toys, and I remember I knew what Mario was. I knew what all of these games were. So when I did play Gianna Sisters, I knew what it was a parody of.
Okay. Well,
I knew what it was ripping off. Yeah. I had that experience already, but I do remember thinking, okay, this is just as good. And then 6 months later, when I was back in the States and I'm playing Mario, I was like, oh my god, Gianna Sisters is slow. Oh my god, is this a slow game?
Yeah, well, it's my best Mario, I think. So
I played it to death on both the C64 and the Amiga, so I cannot say that I disliked the game. Quite the contrary, I really, really have fond memories of it. But it is a little bit sluggish.
Oh yeah. Fun story though, with the probably the most widespread game I know of in Denmark that was never actually released.
That's well, I mean, never actually released in Denmark.
Yes,
I mean, there are copies out there, at least of the C64 version. I think the Amiga version is the one that never got any release, if memory serves me right. Yeah. And it would have been funny because at that time they were also porting everything to the ZX Spectrum. Seeing a ZX Spectrum port of Gianna Sisters would have been hilarious at the time.
Yes. Let's not go there. Flip screen Gianna Sisters is just not going to work, is it? So let's move on.
Well, they got Turrican on there, so I'm just thinking somewhere along those lines it would have been weird.
Yeah.
Okay.
Indeed. So, into more 16-bit news then. Genesis price drops to $149.
Following NEC's announcement last month that the TurboGrafx 16 would be dropping in price to better compete with the still soaring NES, Sega has announced that they will be dropping the price of their 16-bit Genesis from $189 to $149. Their projections are to finally exceed 1 million units sold in the USA in 1991, a number that the Japanese managers have been demanding for a while.
Yeah. So I would have assumed that they've done that already, but it must have been a slow burn. As you say, the NES was the bread and butter of the gamers in the States back then. So yeah.
Genesis could not catch a break. No. None of the big arcade games got ported.
Yeah.
They could not get any of the games from the NES brought over. Nobody was willing to go against Nintendo. They did not have a lot of the big chains. I mean, they weren't in Walmart in the first year. That absolutely killed them. And again, in my interview with Michael Katz, he said, they just kept insisting they wanted, and I can't remember what the Japanese phrase for it was, but it was the 1 million units. They kept saying, we want 1 million units. He was like, dude, we can't do that. We are just too small. And the software, if you look at those first 2 years of Genesis software, there's very little truly memorable in there. I mean, I know there's a lot of people who have very fond memories of certain titles. There's really not that much there. It's not until you get, the Gunstar Heroes, the Sonics, and, of course, Castlevania and games like that coming over that the Genesis really starts to take off. And when you then get publishers doing cross-platform stuff, the first Madden comes out, obviously that's huge, but then you get your Earthworm Jims and stuff, but those are cross-platform. They're not single-platform developments, even if they are originally on the Genesis.
Oh, and so much better on the Genesis.
Oh, yeah, definitely. I mean, that 6800 processor totally beats out the 16-bit variant of the 6502 that's in the Super Nintendo. But then again, it doesn't do Mode 7.
No,
so,
that's true. That's true. Yeah, it's funny. For my money, the Genesis is the better console of the two. It's got the best arcade ports, very, very close to being arcade perfect for an early 90s console. So, yeah, that would be where my money was at back then.
Well, and this is the thing. And this was one of my main impetuses to doing this show, and I've talked about it several times, but for me, in my head, it's still Genesis versus NES. The Genesis Super Nintendo controversy or battle doesn't really exist because so many of the titles are cross-platform by the time the Super Nintendo shows up, and the Super Nintendo is a 2-year younger system. For me, they're not even in the same league anymore.
Oh, that's true.
But, and also that by then you've got the Mega CD. We've already got the first rumors of, other stuff coming down the pipeline possibly. For me, it really was Genesis versus Nintendo. That stuck in my head. But, oh well. I guess, and yes, I know it's also unfair because the Genesis is coming out much, much later than the NES, but still. I just remember those Genesis does what Nintendo don't ads, and those stuck with me. Advertising works, apparently.
Oh, yeah.
But don't tell Ethan that.
So speaking of price drops, the budget price war heats up.
With every major publisher getting into the budget game scene in Europe, a race to the bottom price war was inevitable. Prism Leisure is dropping anchor with their Pocket Power collection of £2.99 price 16-bit games. While budget titles on 8-bit have been this low in the past on tape, this is a new development for 16-bit 3.5-inch floppy games.
Yeah, that is cheap. I mean, of course, we're used to $1.99 and $2.99 for tapes back in the day for the Specky and the C64 and the Amstrad CPC, but yeah, for the 16-bit games, it takes a lot more work to do those games. So, yeah, they have a different price tag normally.
Yeah, and also the 3.5-inch floppy was a somewhat more expensive medium.
Okay.
This really is a sign that, there's just these forces and these back catalogs. I mean, if you remember how many games used to get reviewed every month in the magazines that would be cross-platform. And so there's just this huge churn in the European system where these games are coming out. They only sell for a couple of weeks in large numbers until everybody's got a copy of them every schoolyard is, everybody's traded them around. And so there's this back catalog just pushing, going, hey guys, let's make a couple more bucks off these old titles. And it's going to start cannibalizing the sales of the new games to a certain extent. And, well, yeah. I mean, famously, the Atari ST was selling with, a package of like 20 games, so nobody would buy any more games for the ST once you bought the ST with 20 games, so.
Yeah, true that. It was a different market back then. It must have been hard to be a developer.
Oh, definitely. And I mean, these are retail prices, so that means that the store still gets a percentage, the distributor gets a percentage. It's not like, buying a $2.99 game on Steam nowadays where, you give a 20 or 30 or whatever percentage it is to Steam and then the rest goes to the developer. Here you had a lot of other steps in between.
But enough about all of those fancy 16 bits. Let's hear about some C65 rumors who emerge.
Commodore Format Magazine reports that Commodore is working on a new 8-bit system that would combine much of the existing C64 tech, but upgrade it with a built-in 3.5-inch floppy drive, and enhance graphics hardware capable of displaying IFF images like the Amiga.
Yeah, this famously never happened, of course, but had us drooling for a new C64 replacement for a while.
Oh, definitely. And I mean, it was one of those ideas that was in the air. I mean, we got the Sam Coupe a year or so earlier.
Oh, yeah.
Amstrad upgraded the graphics chip for their CPC line in the GX4000, and I can't remember what the model number of the CPC was that had the enhanced graphics. Do you know?
It couldn't just be the 6128? Oh. Not sure,
I honestly
Not sure.
Cannot remember. Yeah, but there was a version of the CPC that came out around the same time as the GX4000 that also had that enhanced graphics chip in it. And the MSX3, which we've also talked about on the show in past episodes, which I don't believe ever actually got released. There was all these attempts to keep the 8-bit computer architectures going, and somehow, just extend their life a little bit, use that massive back catalog of software and that user base and just get them, to buy another cheap computer to keep going. But, the only versions of the C65 that have emerged were sold primarily after Commodore went bust.
Yeah. Oh well. Let's move into some more modern stuff then. Intel breaks the 100 megahertz barrier.
Intel has announced that they have produced a CMOS-based 486 clocked at 100 megahertz. This is twice as fast as the fastest CPU chip currently on the market. No plans for current release dates are set yet.
Yeah, 100 megahertz in 1991. That's crazy talk.
Yeah, dude. It's just insane what that would have meant. I mean, there was no software available to take advantage of it at that point.
No, probably not.
Nothing.
Yeah.
No. But it's just freaking amazing. A 100 megahertz chip. I remember hearing this news back in the day and just being like, what would you do with 100 megahertz? I mean, what? There's inconceivable. I mean, how much faster you want Monkey Island to run? It doesn't make any sense.
That's true. It wasn't before we got the Doom in 1993, I think, maybe 94.
Yeah.
That's when we finally saw what we could use our megahertz for.
Exactly. It's the moment. I mean, Wing Commander sort of gave you a little bit of a feel for it.
Yeah.
Ultima Underworld comes out also before that. That was the real one that where you're like, okay, now I need the megahertz.
Yeah.
But Doom is the one that just made it all. It had to run in real time. It had to be fast.
Yeah.
And
I still remember the staggering difference. I had an SX. My 4086 was an SX25. So SX being the cheap chips. And one of my friends had a DX266. The more expensive, a lot faster chip. And I remember playing Doom a lot on my own machine, and I was used to the sound of the minigun. And then I went to his place. So at my place, the minigun would say dum 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 dum. Yep. At his place, it would say brrr, and my little mind was blown. What? Is this what it's supposed to be like? So I would have loved one of those 100 megahertz CPUs back then.
It would have been fun. As somebody who did not get a PC until 1995, late 1995, was an Amiga user until then with a Pentium chip. I got to play that occasionally at friends' houses. It was so sad, so sad. I wanted Doom so much.
Yes.
Almost bought a Jaguar because of it. Oh well.
Oh well. But in more PC news, though, 486s are getting affordable.
Speaking of your SX, IBM will be using Intel's brand new spec-down 486SX in its new, more affordable PCs.
Yep.
The SX will cut costs by losing the built-in math coprocessor that distinguished it from the 386, but keeping the extra speed enhancements. You can recover the lost math power for a measly $800 in the form of a plug-in chip. The new IBM system will go for between $8,345 and $8,945.
Oh, God. Oh, what would that be in today's money?
2.5 times.
Oh, man. That's a lot of money. That's a lot of money.
Yeah, and this is why. I've told the story before. A buddy of mine in 1990 bought a 386 33 megahertz machine just to play Wing Commander.
Yeah.
$3,000. But that pales in comparison with the IBM systems that are using 486 chips. But it's only IBM using the 486 at this point because it doesn't make sense for anybody else other than certain business people to be using the 486.
Oh, no.
And that math coprocessor, that's what was missing too.
Yeah, that's the one that was called the 387, I think. The math coprocessor. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
I remember I bought my SX25 and years later, when it was getting too old and people were moving to the Pentium and I was still using it, I got a really, really cheap math coprocessor for it. I could slot into my my motherboard, and it actually made a difference. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and this was the thing that I kind of understand where they were going, what they were going for with dropping the math coprocessor, because you're thinking, for certain functions, people just don't need all that extra math. As graphic functions on the PCs got more impressive, 2D stuff, Excel spreadsheets and so forth, you needed the raw megahertz, but you didn't need the faster math coprocessor for that stuff.
That's true.
And then suddenly, you got ray tracing engines that are just doing nothing but math, and suddenly it makes a difference.
Yeah. But speaking of your friend's 386 DX33, that was it, wasn't it? The first ads for Wing Commander 2 are coming out here in 91.
Yeah, just needed to mention this because it looked cool as hell. Not as cool as Part 1's did. That had a much more stylish cover, but still super cool. The fact that the cutscenes were now no longer characters looking straight at the camera, but a slight angle, the promise of full speech, computer rendered ships. It was just, it was cool. It was so cool.
Oh yes. Wing Commander is definitely a wonderful series.
Oh yeah.
Personal favorites?
Can't go wrong. Personal favorites, yeah. If I was going to list the games, still Wing Commander 1 is the one that, I just have the most feels for.
Okay.
And if I was just going to go on story, I have to say Wing Commander 4.
Yeah.
I love the hell out of Wing Commander 4. It just has that, humans' internal struggle. It's kind of like the Deep Space Nine of the Wing Commander series, if you want to do a Star Trek analogy.
And it's got Mark Hamill in there.
Well, yeah. Wing Commander 3 does too, though. And for 5 minutes in Wing Commander 5. But
Okay. Yeah, I played all the way through Heart of the Tiger not too long ago in the Retro Asylum Game Club, actually, on the 3DO version. Brilliant game, yeah.
Oh yeah, the 3DO version actually worked pretty well. You can tell Electronic Arts worked closely with 3DO to get that up and running. But have you ever played the enhanced version of Wing Commander 1 for the 3DO?
No, never.
Really? Okay, every graphic in the game has been redrawn. Everything looks much more... how do I describe it? Airbrushed photo look. And full speech.
Okay.
You have to look it up. It's weird. The only problem is the 3DO controller kind of lets it down. Have you ever played with the original 3DO controllers?
Yes, I have. Yeah, they do.
Where the diagonal doesn't really work. Yeah, that was the problem with it.
These kind of games, they actually really do need a flight stick, don't they? I mean, playing on the PC with an old flight stick.
Yeah, no, but if you haven't played that, that's definitely a version to look at because of the redrawn graphics. Yeah. I don't know if it's using the same sound files as the Sega CD version of Wing Commander, because that also has audio.
Okay.
And it's just been too long since I've listened to them. But yeah. And like I said, Wing Commander 4 is actually almost best just watching the movies. I didn't get very far playing the game, I have to admit. And I did also play through Wing Commander 3. That was fun.
Yeah. Some good games. I mean, maybe Privateer is probably the very best one, isn't it? But yeah, well.
Yeah. My question with Privateer is always, do we count it as a Wing Commander game or not?
Yeah.
But you're right. It is. Yeah, Privateer is awesome.
Absolutely love that on the PC with a flight stick. That was a brilliant experience.
The one thing I haven't played yet is Privateer 2. I never played Privateer 2.
No, me neither, actually. I don't think I've tried that.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah, it would be something maybe to catch up on at some point. It's, yeah. I always felt, elite, but with more story. Never a bad thing.
Nope. Sounds good.
But, oh well. Okay. I think we're at the end of our news here.
We are.
Peter would be disappointed. There's no company that went broke this month.
Yeah, well,
we have no deaths of companies.
So I don't have the same morbid fascination as he has. So it's not a problem with me, man. It's not a problem with me. I'm just thinking here. How come it's taken so long to actually get me on the show? I mean, I'm feeling a bit left out here. You play around with Peter and John and everybody, but me. What's going on there?
Dude, we've wanted to do this over and over again, and the last time I invited you on, you couldn't make it, if I remember correctly.
Sounds correct.
So this is all you. Actually, that's how it got John, because John could make it. So, and I love John to death. John is a good buddy. We still have a side hustle planned at some point once I get some time. But yeah. No, dude. This is actually, you know what? You need to come on because John and I sometimes on the weekends will play Amiga games.
Oh, sounds
online.
Good.
Yeah, and I think that you would be fun. I introduced him finally to Ethan the other day, so maybe we can get around of I don't know. What was the Amiga port of Bomberman called again?
Dynablaster.
Yeah. We can get some Dynablaster going. That might be fun.
Yep. No Bomberman here because of the IRA, if I could recall correctly, right?
Oh, you're right. I never thought about that, but that makes sense. Yeah. But that still doesn't explain why they changed Bonk to BC Kid.
No, it doesn't. Well, this was fun, guy.
Okay. Yeah, but before we do that, you, as the co-host, you need to give us the word of the day, the word of the episode.
The word of the episode. So the word that actually sums up what this episode was all about?
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it.
Okay.
Usually it's just a funny word that came up at some point, but sure, go for it.
So this has to be, it's going to be more words because it's all about the money. We've got price drops, we've got buyouts, we've got budget wars, we've got everything. It's all about the money.
All about the money.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to let it slide. That's awesome. All about the money. Okay. Mads, thank you so much for finally coming on. It has been the pleasure I knew it was going to be.
Thank you for having me, mate.
Okay. Then everybody, remember, follow us on the Twitters, Patreon. It's only $1 a month. You get a bunch of cool access stuff. And, yeah, that's all I got. And remember, check out this dude's, podcasts. Come on, give me the promos.
Once again?
You gotta promo your shit, man. Come on.
So okay. So check out my podcast. Well, I am a host of the Retro Asylum podcast, of course, where I record with Dean and Steve and Matt and Chris all things retro. Pretty much just games more than 20 years old. We have a game club. We play games with our listeners and have a lot of fun there. Just a continuation of what you and I did back at the Retro Game Squad forums back in the day, actually. And apart from that, I'm actually on a podcast about, well, not retro games, but middle-aged games as well, so almost recent games, called the Playthrough Podcast, where I record with a few gentlemen, also UK-based, where we play all the way through some games, and we have multiple episodes about one game, and we discuss it at length. So if you do enjoy your drawn-out waffles, then that's where you need to go and play some games with us. It's still kind of like a game club. We discuss it on our Discord forums and have fun really doing a deep dive into a single title. We're playing Kentucky Route Zero right now, for example, and that's a game that really needs a big discussion for you to understand what's going on there. So yeah, join us if you're into that kind of thing.
Kentucky Route Zero. What is it about? Horse racers that do math, or
so Kentucky Route Zero is something as weird as a very, very Lynchian adventure game. So it's like a point-and-click adventure game, but it's also like a David Lynch movie. So it's a very artsy, very hard to understand what's going on, and has a great sense of mystery and mood, and it's just a piece of art. It's what you should show people who say that computer games aren't art. So, for example.
Awesome. Okay, that actually sounds fascinating. I've never heard of this before, and I need to check it out now.
Very surrealist.
Links to all of that in the show notes, people. And as always, have fun.
Bye.